Now that we have a better sense of what a confidence interval is for a proportion and now for a mean and the different processes we use by hand and then also now ArtistStat to do that, sometimes we want you to be able to go backwards here in this situation where um, we give you a confidence interval and we ask you to calculate the margin of error or what was the point estimate given that confidence interval. So sometimes we actually want to know what the margin of error is and the point estimate when we are given, like when you're analyzing data or someone tells you a confidence interval, you can work your way backwards. And that's what this example is here. You're given a confidence interval 125 to 147, right? That's the true, that's our estimate for the true mean number of points a student score on a math test. And so you can see a picture here. It's between 125 and 147. The point estimate will be a value right in the middle of the lower and upper bound. So you could think of that as just taking the average of the lower and upper bound. That's what that formula is. Add those two up and divide by 2. Now the margin of error is the distance. It's the actual distance between the center and then the end. And the way you calculate, just subtract 147.6 minus 136.4, which was our point estimate, right? We didn't know that. We just were given this, and then we kind of work our way backwards. We undo it, given the information we have, to then estimate, or not estimate, to actually come up with a point estimate and the margin of error. Now, I could have done 136 minus 125 and got the same answer, and I would have got the 11.2, the margin of error. And this is just another way to write it, right? This notation right here is just another way to write a margin of error. Sometimes this is more meaningful to people because they see where the center is and then they, in their mind, can imagine the error versus just seeing the two numbers. I don't know which one, you decide which one works better, but you do want to be able to articulate a confidence interval in either way and understanding what those numbers are. We end this lesson like we did the last one with sample size, this idea that we care about the sample size. We want to know, sorry, as a researcher, we want to know how many people do I need to include in my study? I need to know the N. And the way we calculate that is we determine at what level of confidence interval we're making. Once we know that, and we have an estimate for the standard deviation, right? And then the margin of error, how many points we want the margin of error, like plus or minus what, right? In the proportion when we had a percentage. Here, these are actual numbers and not percentages. So if we wanted a 95% confidence interval, how many people would we need to include? Well, notice subtly, even though on the we use a T, here we go back to a Z because we're going to assume the normal distribution. In this case, we get a more accurate Z. Again, this is just an estimate of how many people. So Z is an easier value to have since we're more familiar with it. Just an estimate to get very close to the type of margin error we want. You plug everything into the formula once you're given those values, and then you get an estimate. And most of the time it is going to be a decimal, so the number of people you need to include is always going to be greater than this, even though this is closer to 22. 22 people is not enough. I need 23 people to be able to get that margin of error because 22 would be less than this. So that's why we round up in this case.